Start at the bottom of the hour instead of the top here. We're live, maybe? Yep. All right, we are live. This is Stone Guy 223, Guns and Gear chat. Appreciate everybody tuning in. It's going to be bouncing around a few topics. We'll get into Guns and Gears, but first off, let's see who we have with us. On my far left is the Yankee Marshal. Know if he's there or not. Next to him is Edge 4006.
Buenos pistoleros.
He is our token Mexican. And we got Moon Food 78.
What's up?
And Nathan's Armory.
Good to be back from vacation.
And next to him, Mr. Cork 71.
Those them tight.
Yep. All right, so just for everybody that may watch or is watching, I did watch the entire Noir show this time because people were calling me out last week because apparently I missed some shit, so I made sure to pay attention and watch the whole thing, and still don't like it. I mean, I like it all right. The show, it is what it is. I need to quit trying to pick it apart, analyze it. I need to just accept it for what it is. It's a big commercial, in my opinion. So if you take it for that, it's all good. If you try to really pull out any like deeper meaning or anything like that, I think you're going to be at a loss. But
how do you spell the name of this show? Because I've not even heard of it.
Oh, the Colion Noir.
I was hoping they were going to break their beer bottles on each other's heads because they're all props. They're going to start popping each other like on the stage.
Well, hold on, for Nathan, if you really hadn't heard about it, you know who Colion Noir is, right?
Yes, I know him. Yes.
Okay, well he became a spokesperson for NRA, and then the NRA gave him a show called Freestyle.
Okay.
And so it's a show. You can go to his channel and you can catch up on the other episodes.
Okay.
But anyway, it's been rocky, hit and miss. The first couple episodes were horrible. Then it got better, and then they just kind of took a shift because honestly, the first couple episodes they didn't do the whole thing with what's that guy's name? The trainer, race car driver guy.
Yeah, I don't know his name.
I can't think of shit. His name just escapes me. Fuck, I can. Anyway, we all know who I'm talking about. So the last two or three episodes, they've focused on doing training, run and gun scenarios, which is really cool. I mean, that's the part of the show that I really enjoy because at least that exposes shooters, potentially new shooters, to different aspects of shooting sports and being able to get out there and shoot and giving them different ideas. So that part of the show is fabulous for me. But that's something that came, 2 or 3 shows into the season. It wasn't something that was started initially. So I don't know. It still seems to me like they're just bouncing around ideas or changing it on the fly I don't know. But ultimately, it's a fucking commercial. I mean, that's what I'm getting out of it. Not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but I mean, this is the second or third week. Moon Food, you been following it too?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't this like the second or third week that he's done this comparison to Super Hot Chicks and the Daniel well, no.
Yeah,
the first one was the
was
Daniel
the
Defense. Yeah, and then this week it was the HK. But it's the same thing. It's like he's showing a hot chick and he's talking and, all these,
They plug Mossberg.
very expressive words.
You're not supposed to know if he's talking about the gun or the chick.
Right, exactly. I mean, the words that he uses are so descriptive and expressive towards the female that they're picturing, and then and then he says we're talking about the HK 556, and it's like, what the fuck, really?
And then you stick a mag in her.
Stick a mag in it. That's. But no, just and I think you brought it up before. The whole beer thing was just like the beer prop. I didn't see him take a fucking drink. I don't think that.
Not at all. I mean, you would think it's hot as shit in Texas. It's bad. If anything, I mean, if you enjoy beer, you're gonna drink a damn cold beer, and you're gonna have a couple more in one sip. Not sit there and use it and keep your hand cold. It's bad at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, last week it was the whiskey, or maybe it was the week before, and then the cigars, and now the beer, and it's just like the props. I don't know. It just seems forced, and I don't know. I mean, whatever. Like I said, if I just sit back and quit analyzing it and just take it for what it is, then I'm cool with it, and I think everybody would be cool with it because at least it's exposure, nonetheless, of guns and a lifestyle that they're trying to represent. But ultimately,
this week the episode was called like Noir or Celebrities, something about gun celebrities, but they didn't mention much about celebrities at all.
yeah, I mean that was the title, and they did, kind of to start it off. They were talking, he was comparing like the X Games, Tony Hawk with, one person that could be identified with, that culture, the skating / X Games culture. And he's saying we're missing that in the gun culture. And I don't know. I mean, to me, I guess because I'm in that mindset, I can, reference a lot of people that I feel like are celebrities in the gun community, but maybe not as big as.
I think it's because the genres of gun cultures, between shotguns and skeet and competition are so far apart. If you just don't mingle, you don't do them all. Just there's, most of the time, So
I don't think there's enough of a popularity in shooting sports that there's ever going to be a Tony Hawk of shooting sports in our time. At least not right in today's day and age, because it's just not popular enough. It's like name 5 famous soccer players in the U.S. It's hard to because it's not really that big. It's even hard for most people to name like 5 hockey players, much less soccer. But unfortunately, we have kind of the opposite problem. We do have some people that are very famous that are synonymous with guns, but it's people like Ted Nugent.
Or FPS Russia. He's kind of like the poor man's Tony Hawk.
Yeah. So, but even outside of YouTube, no one knows who FPS Russia is. I mean,
well, and I'm glad you brought up James Yeager because honestly, like, to me and a bunch of other people, and especially to YouTube and in the training community and no shit, up at Blade Show, it was kind of like everybody wanted their picture taken with James. I mean, like, the time I was hanging out with him, like fucking 200 people probably came up and were like, oh, it's Yeager, let me get a picture. They all want. So in that atmosphere, Yeager is a celebrity. But I've talked to people, at work and just, out at the range or at a match, and I'm like, oh yeah, Yeager. I was trying to get a class up for Yeager, and I'm like, hey, you guys, would you take some training from James Yeager? And they're like, who is that? And these are guys that shoot, but they're not in that, they're not on YouTube, they're not in the know, so to speak. So I was shocked at really how many people didn't know who James Yeager was outside of YouTube.
I feel you. Every time I go to a gun show, I'm like, don't you know who the fuck I am?
Wait until if you walked out into the street right now and said, hey, does everybody like Hickok? Unless they're YouTube people and they're gun people and YouTube people, which is 1 out of every 100,000 maybe, they're not going to know who he is. And he's one of the biggest channels we got. He's not a celebrity because he exists in a microcosm, and that's all these YouTube gun celebrities are existing in a microcosm. We are a minority of a minority of a minority of a minority who most of us know these certain people.
Yeah, that's a good comparison because Hickok has over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. But you're right, in an everyday general public, Joe Public, they wouldn't know who he was.
It's like I remember I was watching an interview not too long ago with this person. They were a YouTube person, and they were on one of the, like, those shows that does clips, not Tosh.0, but one of the shows like that. And they've got like 2.5 million subscribers, and they said, well, it must be hard to go to the grocery store. He's like, No one ever knows who I am outside of YouTube. Yeah, and that's 2.5 million subscribers 5 years ago. Imagine what that's like now. But no one knows them outside of YouTube. Even the big names. Like if you went to the grocery store right now and said Jenna Marbles, 99% of people are gonna be like, who?
Yeah, no, I am subscribed to her, by the way.
So you're trying to tell me that I'm not famous?
You're infamous.
Ah.
So ultimately, I don't know. I'm loving the run and gun aspect of the show, like I said. But other than that, the forced conversation between those two is getting old, and the just overtone of a commercial. I mean, honestly, it just seems like the whole show is a commercial.
So it takes a long time to develop chemistry, and unfortunately, it may go that commercial route.
So anyway.
Well, yeah, it was a commercials, and it really is not aimed at us. You know, that's not the target group they're aiming at. So it's hard to watch when it's not aimed at you.
Well, that's the other thing. It's been so.
It's like watching tennis. All the commercials on tennis are aimed at things that I can't afford. It's always BMW commercials, Mercedes commercials, Rolex commercials. So every time I watch tennis, and yes, I watch tennis, the commercials are not for me. The endorsements are not for me.
Yeah, the same deal. And just from the start of the show, it's been so all over the place. Because initially when it started, at least I was thinking that it was going to be from some of the conversations early on, was going to be a more focused.
It takes a while to get your footing. I mean, if you like a sitcom, let's say you like a sitcom that ran for 7 to 10 years, if you watch the finale of that sitcom that you really, really loved, and then you go back and watch the first year of it, you'll be like, wow, none of these characters are right. The story's weird, and I don't like it. And that's, kind of the way these shows are. It takes a while to develop your footing, so you can't really judge it by the first 6 months.
Yeah, well, this show's horrible. It reminds me of like the first shows on MTV, so it took them a while too.
And I guess that's a good point.
Yeah, so that's kind of the way I feel about it. The analogy is that they're reaching out, they're trying to figure out who they're going to collect, who's going to respond, and then do their marketing and their numbers, and and then the analysis on data get back and see what they're going to do with it after. I just don't really get anything from it, but it's something to watch. I'm always bored, so there you go.
All right, well, enough about that. Let's move on to the big gun news of the day, so to speak, is something I've just recently heard about. Was
deodorant? The
whole Supreme Court thing.
SCOTUS ruling.
They make gun deodorant.
I knew he thought that's something he just heard of.
A loofah's good for you.
So Nathan, you seem to have the backstory on this. Give us the.
Okay, so there was a cop who bought his uncle a Glock 19 with his police discount, and he of course got busted on it later on, and because being a cop, he's great at hiding evidence. His uncle wrote him a check 4 days ahead of time for $400, and in the memo line he put 4 Glock 19.
It's almost impossible to get busted for straw purchases like this where no one's an illegal user and the gun isn't used illegally, but these guys were like the Laurel and Hardy of how to not do a straw.
Yeah, these guys, classic. I mean, they did it. It just is mind-boggling how. I guess he was a cop and figured out he was above it, or something.
For one, it was a violation of the rules for the police discount. You're not allowed to use that police discount for anyone else. And two, they broke the law, and they flagrantly broke the law. So, I mean, I agree with the Supreme Court that under the law as it stood, they should have been prosecuted.
And okay, so what happened is he challenged it and went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he said, look, I'm a lawful gun owner. I bought it from my uncle who's a lawful gun owner. That law was designed to catch criminals and to stop criminals from receiving these guns. And what the Supreme Court came back and said basically was, whether the end party was a criminal or not, you're not supposed to do it. So we're upholding the charges against you, the law against you, which, again, he clearly, he was trying to argue the intention of the law, which doesn't really work too well with the Supreme Court.
No, it doesn't work well, because the argument he was using is like, say, you got a ticket for jaywalking, and then you went to court and you argued, well, the intent of the laws against jaywalking is to prevent pedestrians to get hit by a car, and since I didn't get hit by a car, therefore I shouldn't be charged under the law. Doesn't matter. You still jaywalked, whether you violated the intent or whether you caused what they want to not happen to happen or not, you still violated the law.
I'm just surprised that anyone really thought that the Supreme Court was going to, side on his side on this.
They did come down with a dissent, but the dissent wasn't pretty much. The dissent didn't say he did something legal. The dissent basically said the law shouldn't be written the way it is.
Right.
Should be more specific. Yeah.
And again, the law itself is ridiculous, because we all know that the way the law is set up doesn't prevent criminals from obtaining firearms in any way.
Not at all. It doesn't stop anything. It's one of those laws that no one thought out before they made it. It's just ridiculous. I mean, the only way, it's one of those laws, if you wanted to do what they say they want to do, then you'd have to go to the extreme of putting to where there has to be a background check on any gun transfer between two people. Period.
So, in the midst of their decision or clarification that the Supreme Court just made, did they change any law, or did they have an addendum to any law?
No, nothing's changed.
You broke the law, you're punished.
So what's everybody so pissed about?
Nothing has changed.
So what's everybody so pissed about if we already had that law and nothing's changed?
A lot of people don't like the law, but I think a lot of people just want to be pissed. I can find better things to be pissed about today.
If anything, really clear identification of the law, and that's about it.
Plus, a couple of the early news reported that there was no more gifts allowed or whatever, and they had to retract it.
Which is BS.
Yeah, they had to retract it later on in the day.
Yeah. That was coming from things like WorldNet Daily and things like that were the ones saying that crap.
Again, now that's a good thing to point out, though, is one of my pet peeves is there are some organizations and some people out there who are going about things in ways I don't agree with that may cause laws to be changed against us. You see what I'm saying? By taking this law up to the Supreme Court, that they're not going to get it thrown out. So clearly the only thing is, what if they interpreted it and said gifts can't be done now? I mean, that could have gone down that way.
That's the same shit that happened with the 7N6 or whatever that designation is, the ammo that just got banned. It was some gun manufacturer asking for clarification because they wanted to make a pistol, and once they realized that, hey, this was going to be a pistol that could shoot this ammo, and then they reviewed the existing laws and said, nope, we got to ban this because it can be shot from a pistol now. So it's the same kind of concept. It was maybe brought forth with good intentions, but after clarification or examination, it fucked us in the end.
Yeah, and it's kind of like here in Texas, people are pushing for open carry, but they're carrying rifles around, and I think the only thing they're going to achieve is getting you can't carry a rifle in public law passed. I don't think they're going to get open carry this way. I think they're going to get laws passed against what they're doing this way, which lessens my gun rights in my state if that happens. But, everyone else in every other state didn't have to carry around shotguns and ARs on their backs to get open carry passed.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'm glad that's kind of fizzling out of the mainstream.
The news cycle.
Yeah. Of course, it sucks that we had to have, 6 or 7 shootings since then to push it out of the front of the newspapers or the news in general. But
and really only one of those was newsworthy, somewhat, maybe.
all the conspiracy that AT&T and Uverse are in cahoots with.
Yeah.
Yep.
As they want to raise your rates, they're driving people insane.
Now, Stone Guy, I kind of have a topic related to my vacation I'd like to bring up.
Sure. What's up?
Okay, so before I went on my vacation, I just offhand mentioned to my mother about, I'm not going to take my 44 mag like I did to Yellowstone. I'm just going to take my pistol, my people pistols, as I called them, and I'm going through Arkansas and Mississippi and Louisiana on my vacation, right? And she's like, well, why do you even need to take a gun at all on your vacation? I have to say that on this vacation, I felt more secure with my gun on any other vacation in my entire life, because the places I went through in Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana did not make me feel safe at all. I mean, I'm talking heavy police presence. I'm talking walking into a Walmart, armed cops in the Walmarts, just watching people trying to stop shoplifting. I mean, and what it made me realize is I didn't realize, because I live in a place where there's so much money in Texas, and I've been to other places in Texas where there's not so much money, there's still, not very much poverty. But when I went to Arkansas and Mississippi and then through parts of Louisiana, I saw the most poverty I've ever seen in my entire life in this 1 week period.
Well,
I mean,
Nathan,
it was disturbing how much poverty there is in those states.
what did Tennessee?
I've never been to Tennessee.
Arkansas.
So what was was that your justification for bringing the firearms, or what was going to be the topic?
I always carry firearms where I go, and I'm glad that I have states that have reciprocal agreements to where I can take firearms when I travel with a car like that. But it's I guess I had 2 points. One is it was kind of an eye-opening thing. I didn't realize the poverty in the South that there was. You always hear about it, but I'd never seen it like this. And then the other thing is just from a safety aspect when you're traveling over the summer and stuff like that. Because, I'm driving. I'm going into places in the middle of the night on weekends and stuff where I'm the person with the least pigment for a mile, things like that, where nothing happened to me, nobody did anything to me, but I felt like a fish out of water.
Are you trying to say you're the only person that wasn't black?
Or Mexican.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There ain't that many Mexicans out in freaking north or west. East.
Anyway, that's kind of one thing that I think a lot of people should be aware of when they're going on vacation. One, check your reciprocities with other states. But two, honestly, and this is a little dramatic and a little Hollywoodish, but you always see movies where people's cars break down and then they're accosted or abducted off the side of the road from someone that stops to help them. It sounds a little, unrealistic, but shit like that happens. It happens all the time. And so, think of the most vulnerable place you could be is broken down on the side of the road. Why not have if you had your firearm with you, you'd have,
Yeah, I stopped last night because I thought a lady was broken down alongside the road. I stopped to help her, but it turned out she stopped because she had hit someone's cat. So then I spent the rest of the night heartbroken because I had to help her take a dying cat out of the street.
Oh, horrible.
That's terrible.
No way to kill the chat there, Yankee.
I feel bad when I run over squirrels, but then I get over it.
Yeah, I feel bad. I feel bad for a week if I run over a squirrel, but seeing that cat last night, and the whole time we were taking it out of the street, I was like, I'm going to have to shoot it because it's badly injured. But by the time we got it into a blanket, it had died. So.
My wife gets on my case for hitting the brakes, not to hit squirrels, and she's like, "You're a hunter. Why would you run over that squirrel?" I'm like, "Because I'm not hunting it with a car. There's no point in running over an animal if you don't have to."
Plus, you talk about guns on your vacation. I had it much worse than you. I had to slum it and borrow a Taurus. Shown in this picture.
Yikes.
It actually used to be my Taurus, but now.
Well, it's good you're holding it with as few fingers as possible away from your body.
Yeah. How does it
Well-
work?
You're kind of like, ew.
How does it work the other day? And
I like the Taurus PT-92. It's actually a good gun. But
some dude almost caused
I
like
wouldn't wait to see me with it.
some dude almost caused like a 10-car collision to let these on the access road or feeder road, whatever you call them, where you're at. Some mama duck and her little ducklings across the road properly, and he like almost caused a big ass collision. Everybody was slamming on their brakes. Like Jesus Christ! I thought like a kid was in the road or something. No, little duck.
Expendable.
Yeah, that's like a law in this state. You got to stop for the ducks. They got signs and everything. You got to stop if they're crossing the street.
Yeah, some of
Okay.
those ducks are protected, like federally protected.
So I was in Louisiana, and I'm driving along on a highway, and it said school zone, slow down to 55 miles per hour instead of 70. And I'm like,
Nice.
damn, these kids in Louisiana must be fast.
You drive the Louisiana highway, it's all this dum 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 dum. They have the shittiest highways in Louisiana. I don't know what it is, man. It's repeated.
Louisiana has crappy highways because they used to have their drinking laws at 18, so all their federal highway money was refused for them for like a decade. That's why they got crappy highways.
Yeah, I did it back in 2005, and I was just like, you'll never fall asleep on that highway. It's just a constant bump, 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 bump.
No, so hold on, real quick. The for gun websites just joined us, and apparently there was an officer in a Virginia officer that purchased a firearm. He got the blue box deal for LE and gave it to his uncle, but his uncle had written him a check for the purchase and actually filled in on the check that it was for the Glock 19 that he bought. So they were charged with a straw purchase, and the guy tried to fight it and took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that it was indeed a straw purchase, and he's going to be prosecuted to the whatever extent of the law
I think he just
provides.
Right,
So they did not make the law. What would you put in there? Law that makes buying for a friend illegal. You can still give a gift. They didn't rule on that.
You can't buy it like as an agent for a friend. Your friend can't say, which just does not make any sense to me whatsoever. I think they should be totally legal. Say like, let's say I'm in West Virginia visiting family, and the brand new gun that I really, really want, or an old gun that I've always been looking for, shows up at my gun shop. An old Smith & Wesson I've always wanted shows up at my gun shop. A friend calls me and goes, hey, this gun's here. I should be able to legally say, as one legal gun owner to another legal gun owner, would you buy that for me? I'll pay you when I get back. But because of this bullshit law, that would make us both felons. Just that simple act between two legal gun owners.
So, okay, I got one for you. This happened 2 weeks
Does
ago.
someone have like an alert going on or something? I hear like this buzzing, vibrating, hollow sound all the time. Hear it? There it is.
Yeah, I hear that too.
Yeah, I think it's Michael.
Yeah.
And anyway, but I was going to say I have a similar thing. So about 2 weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, my across the street neighbor, she wanted me to buy a shield, MP, Smith & Wesson shield, for her husband. She'd give me the money for it so she could give it to him for Father's Day. And I had to basically call her back and go, no, here's how you need to buy the gun, because you can give it to him as a gift, but I can't buy it and then have you give it to him as a gift. You have to buy it and give it to him as a gift.
Okay, hold on. I want to address something real quick because I am confused. So, G-Webs, you put in here that the 5.45 ammo was not caused by an outside influence. Now, I was under the impression, and we had chats on it when this first broke, when the news first broke, that there was a company that was manufacturing the pistols, and that's what incited the Reclarification.
Yeah, and that was speculation, and that was not the right thing, because when they put out their thing to clarify it, they went back 4 years to find an application to supposedly trigger their ban, whatever month that was, a couple of months back.
So they just use that guy's application as kind of a scapegoat for their
They went back and looked through applications till they found one for someone that was applying to import a pistol. So they used that as a justification to trigger those 2 laws that we're always talking about that made the importation from that point on illegal. So say that the way you said it earlier, when I jumped on here, you'd said something like, it sucks that the thing, like you basically said, it sucks that the trap was sprung, with the 5.45 ammo, and that's not the case. They'd love us to think that it was like, hey, we set up this law, for the children, we set up this law for the children, and then some malicious killer came along and tried to bring in a pistol that could kill more children, and luckily our 2 laws stopped it. That's just the system at work. We didn't do nothing. That's the system at work. They'd love us to think that. But what really happened was, for whatever reason, they decided to sit down that day and go back through their records, find something from 4 years ago that was an application to import, and then spring those 2 laws on it, and then basically start telling people they couldn't, they're not going to approve importation applications anymore. So again, if we just go around thinking that it was all the stuff we thought about it was on the first day, we'd be doing ourselves a disservice, because they'd intentionally decided to stop that ammunition from being imported, found all the things they needed, spanning back 4 years, and then, I'm not making this up, this ain't tinfoil hat shit, this is just once those senators that said explain why you did this, once they came up with their letter, it's all around the web already, we just never went back and addressed it. They said, here's why, and here's why, basically saying that somebody applied, there was this law, our hands were tied, we had to do it. The thing they didn't mention is why they decided to just come out of thin air and do that 4-year-old, bring out that 4-year-old situation to light.
Well, no, I'm glad you clarified that, because what was their, what was the catalyst or their goal for doing that in the first place? Like, why all of a sudden do they want to ban that?
They don't want that ammo coming in.
But what's different from that?
They want to nibble away at. They want to continue to punch us so that we continue to step backwards, so that we get used to stepping backwards, and we keep fucking stepping backwards.
Well, hold on. Now, when you look at things like this, and again, it's not conspiracy or anything. These people are in an organization that's a federal organization, and they are under the control of the executive branch. The executive branch wanted to put their ATF director in place, and 4 years ago he was not in place. So they waited till he got in place, and then they were able to do these other things.
No, that's a possible explanation. Yeah. They only brought that new guy in not too long before that.
Right. He was their intern director or whatever. He was the guy who wasn't approved by Congress for many years. So he couldn't do the things he wanted to do because he was trying to get confirmation. So he couldn't go forward with some of his plans. Now he's confirmed he's in. Now he can basically do anything that, Eric Holder asked him to do.
Did we ever find out, didn't we think at one point that it was a lady that was the new head of the ATF?
No, I'm pretty sure it's a guy, but the lady who banned the ammo was a woman who sent the letters out banning it, but she's not the one calling shots, I don't think. We can go to her. I'll go to the ATF website. I'll find out who's the director.
Yeah, I guess I could have done that, but me, I'd rather just guess. No, seriously, I thought at one point we were thinking it was a female that was. But
so I'm getting the impression from earlier in the chat from you guys talking that the anti-gun, anti-freedom people are saying this is a victory on their side.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
the ATF director is an African American guy named B. Todd Jones, and he was the one who I've seen on a YouTube video chewing out the ATF guys where basically one of the ATF people outed them for Fast and Furious, and he had all of them in a room, and he was on a big teleprompter, and he was ripping them for basically leaking their
Now,
stuff. Like,
was this the interim director, or is this the current sworn-in director?
this is the sworn-in director, but he was interim. He was chewing. I've seen a video of him 3-4 years ago chewing out ATF agents because they basically, all the leaks that came out about Fast and Furious and other things that happened, all were from internal things. He basically was telling them to shut their mouths and not release stuff to the news sources.
Oh, okay.
It's way harder to be corrupt when people keep telling people about it.
Yeah, when you can't trust your own agents to keep their mouth shut about doing stupid illegal things.
So, well, and to G-Webs, to get back to what you were asking, yeah, I mean, it seems like they are kind of boasting about the ruling, but the fact of the matter is nothing's changed. Straw purchases have always been
Well,
illegal.
just like I'm going to play Yankee then, because last night he was saying he was blaming people for not jumping on a vulnerable point. So why didn't we use this as like, I didn't know about this. It's going to the Supreme Court. I feel like we were let down. Like somebody should have known about this, because we could have used this as a way to illustrate that this is a stupid law. Straw purchase is stupid crap. This is a perfect point. A guy can't buy a gun for his uncle.
Well, let's play devil's advocate for a second for the anti-gunner, because if you did away with quote unquote straw purchases, then they would say any person legally able to buy a firearm could easily buy a firearm for someone that wasn't legally able to.
Oh, sorry, I'd say so what?
Well, that's just the point. I mean, that would give them another platform, another stepping stone to bitch about or to stand on and be like, all these legally purchased guns that are killing people they were purchased legally, but then they were given to the people that did the crime. You know what I mean? They would figure out some way to spin that against us.
Then we should spin it back at them, because what the hell? They're stopping somebody from buying a gun from their uncle. It's a stupid law. It's not solving anything, and it's preventing a person from buying a gun from their uncle or for their uncle.
It is a horrible law. Yeah.
Why doesn't the law just say you cannot purchase for nor transfer to a gun to someone who cannot legally own one?
Yeah, see, I would.
That's exactly what the law should say.
All it has to say. I mean, maybe if they want, they can make some Xerox copies of a little thing that says, "Don't sell this gun to a criminal." And then, whenever there's a criminal using a gun, if they really want, go after everybody.
Yeah, and if they just said, "Hey, if you transfer guns to criminals, you're going to be responsible if something happens," which they do now anyway. People would, if they just gave them like a little letter saying, "Hey, if you're buying this gun for someone else, you better be aware of their criminal background, because if they're a criminal, you can go to prison for 5 years." People would be like, that asshole can come buy his own gun if they don't know him well enough.
Exactly. That'd be more effective anyway, because then all the dupes who are straw purchasing anyway are going to go, "Oh, really?" And all the dumb girlfriends are going to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Exactly. On the 4473, instead of asking this question, say, if you're purchasing this gun for someone else, you can be held as an accessory to any crime they commit with it. If they're a felon or something, I don't know. If you're transferring this gun to a felon, you could be an accessory to criminal acts. That would stop a lot of people, I would think.
Or just have a different kind of form for purchasing and transferring to somebody else at the same time.
Was that a 40? Was that a 40
that,
Smith & Wesson sitting next to a 9mm like Glock 19, 17?
But you have to understand the point is
9mm.
their belief in the NICS system is like, well, we can't run a NICS check on them, and how would you know if the person was a felon? Because you're not the FBI, and we have a NICS system. That's going to be their argument. It
take down that argument.
Well, it completely deflates the NICS system, which they so believe in is the perfect system.
Well, I mean, that's
which is really irrelevant, because every other gun, once it's owned, can be sold person to person.
If FFLs, and I as an FFL, to be honest, if I was selling guns to people as an FFL, and I knew in this litigious society that if I sell a gun to someone and they walk out the door and go to their neighbor's house and shoot him in the face, If he was already a criminal, I'm going to go to jail because I sold a criminal gun. I would love having the NICS service as a tool that limits my liability. And that's the only reason I see for the NICS check. It is a tool to limit the liability of businesses that sell firearms as a business who have to deal with, you and I transfer a gun, how often do we do it? So we have to make sure we don't transfer guns to felons a couple of times a year. Those FFLs got to make sure they're not transferring a gun to a felon a dozen times a day. So I can see where they would want something to limit their liability. So that NICS check is very important to a lot of gun shops.
Doesn't that mean it has to be mandatory, and it doesn't have to be run by the government? In fact, it shouldn't be run by the government, and it shouldn't be mandatory.
Well, again, the straw purchase is ridiculous in the fact that it only affects new gun sales. It has no effect on existing sales person to person on a gun you've owned for a little while. And like I said, it's just like Yankee's example and my example, where we have friends who want to give something as a gift that's a surprise. I can't assist my next door neighbor's wife, whose husband's a fireman, who I've taken to the range multiple times, who got his concealed carry. I can't buy a gun on her behalf. So,
is that the sexy fireman that you say
According to this, you couldn't buy a gun for your father's brother.
Yeah, this is your uncle. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
The thing is, he could buy the gun for him if he was giving it to him as a gift, but he was acting as an agent.
Well, as an agent, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's dumb.
You can do that with everything else. It's ridiculous. And that's why I'm saying it seems like a lost opportunity. If this was literally up in front of the Supreme Court, we should have been doing, again, exercising our ability to, get out there and vocalize to the people that need to hear it, that this is something that needs to be changed or looked at. And, instead of doing all the stuff everybody hates, like open carrying long guns, we could be doing something effective right now at a national level. Except we freaking lost it, I guess, already.
That's like what I say. Who's really on our side? Because where were the big gun organizations in this opportunity to do something?
Seriously, any of them. I haven't even heard about this, and it's not like I have my head in the clouds with this stuff.
So, okay, I just took one of my rifle barrels over to my dad's house. He sent it off with his rifle barrel to get it cryogenically frozen, and now he's received it back. Now he's going to take it to the gunsmith to have something fixed on mine, and then I'm going to go pick it up. So all this time, all these transfers, no gun was purchased, but he's using my gun, moving it around, sending it to people, getting it worked on, and nothing about that's illegal. But as soon as my uncle, who lives in Atlanta, who wants to buy a gun from the same gunsmith, he might go to my dad and say, hey, can you buy the gun and pick it up for me, and then I'll pay you for it when I come back from Atlanta in 2 months and pick it up from you? That's illegal. Doesn't matter if you already have a gun and transfer it all over hell and back like I did and get it frozen and returned, but if he buys that gun for my uncle on his behalf because it's a custom gun shop in Texas and my uncle's in Atlanta, that's a felonious offense. That's ridiculous.
Now, let's keep in mind, if I sell a gun privately, though, let's also remember this. If I sell a gun privately and some guy shows up, I advertise it on my local forum, and a guy shows up, meets me in the parking lot, wants to buy it, and I get a vibe from this guy, he's real twitchy, he doesn't want to, I don't want to show you any ID, blah, 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 and then he's a felon and runs off with that gun, and I still choose to sell it to him, I can go to prison for that. And that's the only law that needs to exist as far as transferring guns. If you transfer a gun to a felon and you don't take, precautions to make sure you don't, you're responsible. I believe in personal responsibility. I've many a times canceled a deal on a gun because the guy showed up and didn't want to show me ID or, didn't want a bill of sale or, just acted fishy because I'm responsible if I transfer that gun to a felon.
Right, and I vet people whenever I sell them my used firearms. The same as they vet me, and I do bill of sale and show ID and all that. And
I usually either have to know you or know someone that knows you before I'll sell you a gun. Now, if you're an upstanding citizen and you can come and there are times when I sell guns people I've never known, but it's guys like, hey, I'm a deputy with the Longview Police Department, or hey, I'm a fireman here in town, or hey, I'm a Baptist preacher here in town, and I've got no reason to believe those people are criminals. Because I believe that 99.9% of the people I meet every day are not felons. I'm not going to operate under the belief that all people are felons until I verify they're not. I'm kind of the opposite. I assume people aren't felons until they give me a reason to think they are.
Well, that reminds me of something. I was talking to a friend of mine today who works for the post office. He was telling me he went to buy a gun, and the NICS check got held up on him, and he had to contest a NICS check. This guy works for the post office and has 2 federal background checks a year done on him. And he's worked for the post office for a decade.
Well, that's why.
So,
And that's how
how
stupid
did the
system
NICS
is.
checks get held up on him?
That's how NICS checks work. 'Cause if there's anything that gets flagged over to another thing, top secret, or you've had this or that, or pilots, all kinds of shit will get flipped back over to, basically review. Just how, well, I don't know if you ever called them in, but when you call them in, they're going to go to review. If it's your name's like John Smith or, Alan Poe or something, if you've got like common names, it's going to just automatically go over, especially if you don't give it a social. And the same thing will happen with people that have any kind of clearance or anything.
Every time I buy a gun, every time I get sent to further review. And I guess there are certain people that are qualified to do certain checks, like if you've had a top secret background check, there are only certain people there that can actually look into your record because they have to be cleared themselves. So half the time, or 90% of the time, there's someone there that can look and they'll say, okay, yeah, you're clear. But like if I buy a gun on a Saturday, about 2/3 of the time I go to review, there's no one there that can do the review, and I have to wait till Monday.
That's just ridiculous.
Well, it is when you think about it, that they can tell somebody just from their name or just from those things that we put on 4173, if they're on a list or not. It's insane that we got, the people are down with the idea of us having these massive, massive lists of everybody with a little check next to them if they're good or bad.
And why can't you, and just in theory, why can't they have Yankee on a clearance list after he's bought guns until he does something illegal and needs his clearance?
I can get a number, but the number doesn't work if you've ever had a top secret clearance. But I actually am kind of glad that there isn't a list where they just look and say, oh, well, he just bought a gun last Thursday, so let's clear him, because that would mean there's a list.
Right, exactly. In other words, they can't keep a list, or at least they can't publicly keep
they
a
obviously
list.
have a file on Yankee showing he's top secret, so let's they flag him.
But that's the thing. They are asking. It's the FBI, and they're asking.
They're having to ask the same questions every time he buys a gun. I guess that's a good point.
But they're like for him, they're asking the Army. But for somebody else, they'd be asking somebody else. And for somebody else, they'd be asking another department. So it's not like they keep a list at the FBI. They just go through the same process every time.
I'm just glad that I have a CHL in Texas and I bypass the list, because I'm sure I'm on some type of crappy list on a federal level from hanging out with you guys.
Well, and that's the thing, is that you never know, and you could be on 100 lists, you could be on a good guy list, you could be on 60 good guy lists, and then you could snap when your wife, screws around or something. So it makes no sense at all that they think that by putting people on lists, they're going to somehow solve crime. All they're doing is wasting a bunch of money. And making a big-ass list, so when Red Dawn happens, the Cubans can just go right over and grab that list.
I think that's the biggest sporting goods store.
Was it Cubans in the new Red Dawn? Who was in the new Red Dawn?
No,
I don't acknowledge that as an actual move.
The new one was Cubans.
We only talk about the old Red Dawn.
The old one's the Russians.
Never saw the new one. So
Russians and Cubans.
Russian advisors with Cuban troops.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome movie. I even like if you don't compare the new one to the old one, it's a fantastic movie. If you watch the new one and you're constantly comparing it to the old one, then you're going to be disappointed.
If you can deal with some dick leaving his rest of his team to go rescue a stupid girlfriend from the bus, then you can watch the new one.
Well, pussy does make you do crazy things, so.
Yeah.
What do you?
You ever seen a war movie? Not that. Not leave all your dudes behind and not let the mission, not complete the mission.
Yeah. So I think the more important thing is the fact that I just lost my train of thought because you just said something, but then we got off on the movie.
Well, I think we lost a real battle. I mean, something that could have been significant if we could have gotten everybody to look at the stupid straw purchasing crap. They definitely alluded to it in 12, and they fiddled with it when they changed the definite. What did they change with the Rams? Right? They changed something on that one Friday night before Memorial Day.
That's what I was going to say. I just remembered. That's what I was going to say. I said the more important thing here, I think, that we could really get across to people is the fact that with what's happened recently with the shootings that we've had, that those have all been firearms that were purchased legally. You know, regardless of the outcome, you know, as tragic as it was, the fact is that didn't stop it. You know, having laws on the book, NICS didn't stop it.
Were passed before the massacres.
Exactly. Right. So right there should be enough evidence to.
Well, they have an argument for that, and their argument is that, well, since it was legal for them to buy it, then nobody should be able to buy it.
Yep.
And their other argument is they just
awesome. I wish they would say that.
So many other people.
Oh, that's what that mom's group is saying. That's what that mom's group is saying.
They need to all bring that up.
That mom's group is saying that they just think it's way too easy to purchase a firearm since their initial platform was kind of shot down. Now they're switching to, well, it's just too easy to buy a firearm. We need more restrictions. The guns are too easily accessible in this country.
Well, who are we going to restrict? Are we going to restrict people that have done bad things or have illnesses, which we already do? Or are we just going to start restricting anyone that could potentially do something wrong? Because that's the only next step they could literally take.
That's why we need to address them on this one. If that's really what they want to take up as their rally call.
That's why you've got to push their argument to the ridiculous extreme, because that's the only thing they could start doing now that they don't already do is start screening people that could potentially cause a problem or could potentially be. Or they could say, you know, you can't own a gun because you were picked on in high school. Or you can't own a gun because you're a 28-year-old white guy, and we know how bad 28-year-old white guys are for tempers. You know, that's what the stuff they'd have to start doing. Preemptive, make everyone a felon by default, and then make you prove that you'll never commit a felony before they sell you a gun.
Well, you can't own a gun if you were bullied, because then you would just be trying to get back at all the bullies, and you can't own a gun if you were a bully, because then you'd be hurting all the people you bullied.
And forget gun safety classes. Go to anger management before purchasing a gun and be basically rubber stamped that you're not crazy.
Well, what I heard is they want everybody, before they purchase a firearm, now have to go through a psychological exam as part of the background check.
Who's going to pay for that?
The person buying the firearm.
No, who's going to pay for keeping that system in place? Is what that thing just happened. You know, psychologists don't just give psychological exams.
Right. I mean
they'll open up clinics that you can drive through. You can like push in the buttons like on a caliber and what type of gun you're going to buy.
Is it like the DMV but staffed with psychologists?
Yeah, the thing
you type in the caliber and gun you want to buy, and then they send a little tube thing out to the drive-through that tells you if you get your diploma of competency or you're insane.
See, they give you a chocolate bunny to eat, and then if you eat it wrong, you're disqualified.
They could never get that
if you eat a Pop-Tart into a gun, you're violent.
They could never get that passed because the medical community, the psychological community, would not go along with it, because the widely held thing in the psychology community is you can't predict a psychotic break. Anyone can have one anytime. Often there's no indicators. Sometimes there's indicators. Sometimes there's not. So you'd never be able to clear anybody, because quite often with psychotic breaks, there's no indicator.
Well, when are people going to realize that no matter what the tool, no matter what the situation, crazy is crazy, and someone hell-bent on murdering people is going to do it, you know, regardless of what they have at their disposal to do it.
Bad people will do bad.
If I decided I wanted to kill as many people as I could today without being harmed myself, I would just go downtown when it's busy and just start plowing people down with my truck and keep going.
Yeah, there's the the issue at hand that I've seen is the way that the news media in a way, gives so much attention to these people, because that's what they really want. They want to get attention when they decide to have their break or their outburst. They want focus. They want people talking about them. They want to be on the news, and they've discovered the best way to do that is with a firearm, because it's not the most effective way to take out a lot of people. It is the best way to get all over the news, though, as long as you go after the right people.
Terrorists have proved firearms are not the way to kill a massive amount of people.
Yeah. But go after a few sorority girls, and you're all over the news.
Like I said in the video, if that guy hadn't had a gun and he severely wanted to kill sorority girls, if he didn't have a gun, instead of taking a few unsuccessful pot shots at him on street corners, he would probably just burnt the sorority house down with 30 or 40 of them in it, which would have been much more effective as far as killing people. But instead, he went the easy way and was unsuccessful, and he didn't really get much done.
Yeah, Nathan and I talked about actually that exact same
didn't hurt any
topic
property.
off air when that happened. How easy it would have been to kill a whole bunch of people just with a fire.
Hell, remember that guy that, was that local or was that national? But there was a guy that got his kids taken away from him, and the social worker took the 3 kids over to visit, and he shoved her out and locked the door, and then he blew his house up with him and his kids in it, killed all of his kids and himself. You know, people be like, well, if he hadn't had a gun, he couldn't have done that. But, well, he didn't use a gun. He blew his house up. Because when it first came on the news that the father had killed the 3 kids, everybody's like, oh, he must have shot him, blah, blah. Turned out, nope, he didn't shoot him. He didn't have a gun.
What?
He blew his house up.
When was this, Yankee?
This was several years ago.
Okay, I don't remember ever seeing that on the national news.
It might be local.
What you got for us, G-Webs?
Look it up. I can't remember.
So I'm reading this thing from the Supreme Court's blog telling, I don't know who this guy is, so I don't know if it's somebody from the Supreme Court or just some guy writing an opinion about what he thinks happened with that case with the straw purchase bullshit. So how does the Supreme Court work? There was a case brought against this cop who bought the gun for his uncle, and then that went to whatever local court, and then his lawyer said, that's bullshit, it needs to go to a higher court, and then the higher court took it. So the lawyer does that, though, right? And then they go to another court, and then the lawyer's there, and they get a decision, and then it goes to the Supreme Court, or is the Supreme Court that first jump?
No, it's not the first jump. It normally goes from local federal court to state court, then to regional court, then to the state court, the Supreme Court.
So this has been in court for a while. The same lawyer the whole time?
Probably.
So then in the Supreme Court, is there lawyers there? Does this guy plead the case to them, or do they just take the decision and talk about the decision?
I am not sure how that works, if they're able to argue in the Supreme Court, like they do in...
Well, I know... Okay, so I'm not sure either. The reason I'm asking is when I'm going through this and looking at it, it seems to me like who the hell cares about this particular case, because at least this analysis of it is all about... It's very narrow visioned. It's all about the guy buying the gun for his stupid uncle or whatever. But why isn't the focus of the decision on whether or not the law is just? Because I thought that's the ultimate point of the Supreme Court decisions.
No. Actually, hold on. I can tell you the Supreme Court is specifically set up once it goes to federal appeals court and there's still conflict, they send it up to the Supreme Court. And they narrowly look at what the lawyer states is a problem with procedure. They don't determine if the law is good or bad or blah, blah, blah. They are really just set to be kind of the tiebreaker to decide if a procedural thing was done incorrectly or if evidence was left out or if maybe evidence shouldn't have been put in because of something procedural. They're very focused in their scope. Although they write these giant, drafts, That's not what they hear from the lawyers. The lawyers are only supposed to talk about particular procedural matters when they take it to the Supreme Court. And then they all get together and make up a whole giant thing to say, here's why we said this, and here's why, and here's clarification for the lower courts.
They interpret the Constitution and apply it towards the argument that's submitted to them by the lawyer. The lawyer does argue, but they use the Constitution, and all of them as a whole interpret the Constitution to see if there's any validity to the argument at hand. The argument doesn't fit, with their opinion. That's what they give their opinion, and then that's what their opinion is the one that you have to deal with.
Then it seems to me like it was a massive loss today.
Right, and just for clarification, this comes from Ralph. They just review the ruling the Supreme Court does.
Right, and the thing is I don't see this as a massive loss today, because it never really, the way the Supreme Court operates, it never really was a challenge. You know what I'm saying? Like there are cases that the Supreme Court stays away from the real cases, the ones that really make decisions a lot of times. They'll avoid a lot of gun stuff because they can. They could just choose not to hear a case. So this one, looking at the details of the case, I could have told you, any lawyer could have told you what the outcome was going to be before it went up there.
Yeah, but people can write those briefs to the court to make them think about it in a broader sense, right?
Right, and again,
or to encourage them to think about it in a broader scope. So like this one, it's like, hey, is this particular nuance still this particular nuance still underneath the law? And
right.
Then they said, yes, it is. But I'm saying what they should have been doing is going, look at how this instance is created by this bullshit law. This bullshit law is unconstitutional. It shouldn't exist.
Yeah,
and they should be ruling on the law, not this instant, not the facets of if this guy wrote a check or whatever the hell the details are.
Yeah, I think honestly, I see exactly where you're coming from with that, but I think the bigger picture is they weren't ready to make that statement or set that precedent for reinterpreting the law, because if they had, that would have opened up a can of worms for previous straw purchases that were prosecuted in the past.
Screw that. It would have also made it so that we get to address a big chunk of the stupid 1968 and the parts that were amended by 94. So I think if we're gonna, yesterday Yankee was scolding Bush for not doing anti-gun stuff right after 9/11. I mean, this is again the reason I didn't agree with Yankee is because that was right after a massive incident, that was shaking the planet literally. There's nothing going on right now. It's freaking, Monday afternoon. So we should have been at least aware of this, so that if some of the groups wanted to rally behind this and make it a focus on the fact that they're prohibiting a cop, right, from buying a gun for his uncle to save a few bucks. Come on, it's ridiculous that this law exists. Anyway, that would be rehashing it, but I think that it's a big loss because we didn't take that opportunity to wail on this.
Well, and again, the Supreme Court, they couldn't come out and just say this law, they couldn't just find this law unconstitutional, because that would change precedents in the past. That's one of the rules that they kind of try to follow, is if things were decided in the past, don't undecide them now. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, because they've supported other challenges to straw purchases, they can't go and just say this is unconstitutional, because the Supreme Court in the past should have said it's unconstitutional. So kind of once they get these laws in effect, they can't throw them out. They have to throw them out the first time they come up.
Well, all right, then that might be the way that it's sometimes handled, but that doesn't mean that we can't use the system in other ways or use the system. And I don't think if we just watch it happen, it's just going to happen. If we get up and stand in the damn way, we can get up and stand in the damn way.
Unfortunately, to get this law basically taken off, we have to get people to take it off the books. We're not going to get it through the courts taken off. This particular law about straw purchases, that it's not going to be taken out by the
Why has it got to
court.
be all or nothing? Why can't it be?
I'm not
we
saying it's
lost
all
the
or nothing. It's the legislation is the way to get rid of it.
All right, well, I'm saying this was a time when all that happened was a cop bought a gun for his uncle. We could have brought this, all kinds of stink out about this, and who's going to really scold us for defending a cop buying a gun from his uncle? I don't care if it actually solves it. We lost a real potential here to go after something that nobody would really get offended by. Nobody. Well, at least the best potential, a really good potential, and not a lot of people getting offended by a cop buying a gun for his uncle to save a few bucks. I guess ex-cop, but still.
Yeah, now.
Well, seriously, because the next time we're going to see something potentially get up to the Supreme Court level that has to do with straw purchase, it's going to be something like gangbanger kidnaps a girl and forces her to be their gun purchaser for years in the basement or something. You know what I mean? And then it's going to go up there and they're going to say, see, it wasn't strong enough. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think it's worth writing some letters and saying, what the hell? GOA, like Second Amendment Foundation, and everybody else, the hell? Why didn't you even talk about this? Unless
Well,
they did talk about it, and then it's all our fault for sitting around talking about bullshit.
The only reason that this did even make it to the Supreme Court is because of the push from the NRA-ILA pushed it up there.
I know they'll take credit for every single thing that happens, and even unproportionately popular. I've seen them do it here in Arizona, but that doesn't. I'm not going to take that for gospel until I, hear it from basically impartial third parties online. Not that you're not. I'm just saying, I haven't even looked into it yet. But if this was something that had been, obviously this has had some amount of time if it's gone through multiple courts, right? So that's telling us, is it possible that the whole concentration lately on California, Seattle, Georgia, and all the other freaking places lately, maybe all this attention is to take the attention away from this, where they saw potential, but if we watch this, we'd actually have a discussion about the stupid law that doesn't work, where they get to now focus the attention on a bunch of criminal behavior that they get to blow out of proportion and call mass shootings, so that they can actually get the momentum going their way, so that when news like this comes out on the national front, it just gets pushed over like, well, here's some common sense shit that happened that didn't really affect anybody, and nobody should really care because they're not punching for a jugular this time. They only hit us in the kidney.
Yeah, they are trying to rattle their saber and say, look, we have a victory, when it's not a victory, it's just upholding the status quo. That's like me going and going to court and arguing the fact that I got a speeding ticket, and then they decide in the favor of the cop, and I'm like, everyone's like, see, the speed limit works. No, it doesn't. Maybe that's a bad example.
Yeah, that's a bad example because
But
really
I'm
the
just
speed
saying
limit
it's-
doesn't change, and that's the thing. They're not going to change the limit, the speed limit, based on your ticket, and they weren't going to change. They weren't ready to change the definition or the interpretation of a straw purchase based on this guy's single action. And I
Right.
think that's the bigger picture.
And again, when you have to look at these strategies and how you take things up at the Supreme Court, again, these guys aren't hearing the real cases that really are going to decide things. They're hearing stuff like, because you got to realize these cases that go in front of the Supreme Court, they cherry pick them. And there's been a couple cases that they refuse to hear that really do have something to do with gun rights, that were far more important than this guy buying a gun from his uncle. I mean, I forgot what exactly they were that they shot down looking at, but it was cases like I think there was a case about not letting 18-year-olds buy handguns. That was a case they refused to hear.
There was one for a shall issue in New Jersey, I think.
Right. Yeah, they're trying to avoid the shell issues because if they set precedents on the shell issues, then all of a sudden all these states that have the may issue all of a sudden will have to do the shell issue. So they want to avoid cases like that.
Right. Well, but I agree with G-Webs in the fact that this circumstance with this guy being a police officer and buying a firearm for his uncle that was also a lawful gun owner, wasn't a felon, this was probably our best chance of it being heard in the most positive aspect possible.
In a positive light, exactly.
Well,
That's
there's a
true.
reason why they don't want to hear these things, and it's because it'll go against the status quo at the moment. And it's just kind of like with gay marriage. When they first had the chance to rule on gay marriage, they chose not to. They pushed it off because they knew when they ruled that gay marriage was going to become the law of the land. So they waited and waited and waited until they thought things were more in. And they even said in their judgment they had to wait till they thought the social conscience was in line with the law. And that's kind of a good thing for gun rights in a way, because when they refuse to hear these things like shall issue, it means they know that if they ruled today, the law of the land would be everyone has the right to carry a gun. So they have to wait and not do it now.
Well, I am fearful that they're deciding a lot of cases 5-4. So if we lose one pro firearm judge, we're kind of hosed. Because they're going to put a person up there that's anti-firearm, and that's the problem. Is these people being elected and put in these positions, not elected, but being appointed and put in these positions, they are they're politically motivated. They're activists. They want to change things. They're not, in the sense, doing what the Supreme Court's supposed to do, which is simply interpreting the laws compared to the Constitution and what the Founding Fathers wanted. They're wanting to change our social.
Make a name for themselves, I think, is a bigger thing.
Not even that. They're going to sell books and make names for themselves, and they're appointed for life, but they're wanting to change. They're wanting to mold our country into what they think it should be, not interpret it and keep it the way it was intended to be. That's the issue I have with them, is they get together wanting to change things.
Scalia, Roberts, and Brown have been douchebags for the longest time. I'm kind of in between everything as far as politics, but not partial to either party. But those guys have always been really hardcore conservative, like really crazy conservative, with their ruling, especially Scalia. And I know they're all. I assume they're gun friendly because they're conservative, but I don't have any record on or any history on any all three of them.
So Ralph just posted a thing on Wikipedia, which is always accurate, that says it has the U.S. Supreme Court cases on firearms. So there's not that many of them. The first one was 1875. The next one was 1886. The next one wasn't until 1939. The next one after that was 2008, now 2010, and then today in 2014. So of the, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cases, 3 of them have been since 2008. So he's already had 3 Supreme Court cases on the Second Amendment. There's only been 3 in the whole history of the country until him. It's an interesting way to look at it, I think.
Damn, yeah, that's amazing. Because you said it went from 36 to 2005?
From 1939, which was the one we hear about with the shotgun barrel having a length less than 18 inches, and its use with the military/militia, if everybody remembers that one.
Mm-hmm.
The United States versus Miller. So that was after the stupid the 1934 National Firearms Act. The one before that was in 1886, post-Civil War, right? And that probably said militias had a right. Okay, that was something about post-Civil War, and then the 1875 was another post-Civil War.
But you said from 39 to what? So
basically, we had 2 hits after, 2 rulings after the Civil War. We had a ruling after the 1934. NFA, and then the next one was 2008, the Heller decision, having the ability to own a firearm in D.C., and that made it an individual right to own a firearm in the U.S., right? That supported the Second Amendment in that case. 2010 was the McDonald-Chicago one, where that ruled the Second Amendment was incorporated through due process of the Fourth Amendment. It said that basically that one said that Chicago couldn't overrule the Second, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm interpreting that one right, but basically these both happened just in the last couple of years, and now today we just had a third time that they ruled on a Second Amendment issue. Supposedly, again, I think it's the worst thing ever when it doesn't seem like it's that big a deal, because they don't take shit to the fucking Supreme Court when it's not that big a deal. And this basically has secured the fact that it's okay, that it's legit to have this giant list, this emerging list of who's good and who's bad, which is what we're really talking about. If you can buy a gun, if you're on the good list.
Well, see, I think it's
that necessitates a list at the federal level.
And I think it's interesting that we haven't had one, because we had another major gun one in 68. Was it 68?
That was a federal law, but not a federal ruling at the Supreme Court level.
Right. So, but another federal law in 68. But the point is no one challenged that or brought that up, or at least they didn't hear a case since. I mean, you're talking from 1939 to 2008, either. Which I probably can't. I'm sure there was cases brought up, but the Supreme Court just wouldn't hear it.
Right.
So that's pretty shitty.
Yeah. It's kind of scary now that they're, like I say, now that they're actually doing stuff in the last little bit.
So do you think that's going to be a representation of positive firearms legislation, or?
I think my personal opinion, positive firearms legislation is the removal of legislation at a federal level.
Right, but I mean, given the history that you just read and the fact that we have had more cases actually being heard as of late that were all wins, more or less.
2 out of 3.
So I mean, is that going to be indicative of things
to come? Are these wins? I mean, they didn't.
Well, you said they
weren't death blows.
The DC was a win.
No, well, I mean, I guess, like I say, it's not a death blow, but it's not perfect. It didn't rule out that, it didn't get rid of the NFA.
Right.
And the Chicago one was even less so. I don't know the details on that one. That's my bad.
Yeah, these...
I've never heard of either one of them held up as like, we won, we finally have what we wanted by any of the pro-gun. I mean, they don't discount them. They're positive, but they're not anywhere near as positive as they needed to be.
Yeah, you're right. They're positive in the point that they were decided in our favor, but they didn't increase a massive number of people's rights.
And they have some scary little pieces to them that they left open intentionally by a lot of people's minds. So that's why I'm saying the fact that they're up there fiddling with it right now, they could just leave it alone. They could be scared shitless and leave it alone. We would basically be winning then. That's government in gridlock. That's what we want. Government that can change, but because there's a discussion, it can't rule down one way or the other or sneak a ruling in one way or the other because there's enough people talking about it. I get scared when they get up there doing little chess moves. What's the end game?
You got to remember too, decisions like Chicago's concealed carry only made it to district federal court. That one, made Chicago. It's District 7, I think.
Ralph can't get in because he says he has bad internet, but he makes a good point in the chat that if straw purchases are bad, and this ruling just enforced that, right? Who can't interpret that out of this ruling? Straw purchases, no matter what the fine details, are a bad thing, and it's a good thing we have that stupid law because that stops crime, right? That's what the Supreme Court just verified, verified, I guess. Then what's the difference between that and a private sale? A straw purchase is selling to someone who's not verified or not given the little check mark next to their name. Every single private sale is that.
Well, and that's why they're going after. I mean, there's been a big push within the ATF to go after private sales. I mean, that's the next thing they're trying to get rid of. I don't know about in your area, but I know in my area and surrounding
the gun
counties
show
and states, the gun show loophole. Yeah, they're actually going. I mean, I've talked to vendors, dealers that have been doing these gun shows for 15, 20 years and never seen the presence of the ATF like there's been in the last 2 years, where they're actually coming by and checking, before the gun show opens, they're checking all the booths, they're checking paperwork, they're checking, it's like they just have a hard on for these dealers.
I've never seen that happen.
Yeah, well, exactly. But that's what I'm saying. It's happening Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina that I've been exposed to.
Could be that they're just becoming more aware of it now as they noticed in the past.
No.
They're more paranoid, and they're trying to crack down on what they perceive as a problem, even though for all these years it's never been any kind of problem. They have got to find a problem, and since there is no problem, they have to send more and more people to discover any little problems.
Yeah, and the theory is that as of late, like I said, in the last 2 to 3 years, it's the push from the president and the new director to get out and do something, to get out and earn your pay, so to speak.
Without getting horribly political, the president didn't say a single word about firearms his whole first term. Now that he's gotten reelected, it's become his primary focus. And he's got his director now in place that he wanted, and now the president, the attorney general, and the director of the ATF can go and start really doing what they've always wanted to do that they couldn't do during the first term, and that is find anything possible to make firearms more difficult to get. Now, the problem that he's having is they're doing it publicly enough that everyone who can buy firearms is going out and buying them. So it's doing the reverse of what they intended. They want to hassle.
Oh, they don't care about that. Their intention is just to screw with us. It's not to solve anything.
Well, again, it's just like anyone. If you make more stringent laws saying I can't do something or make it harder to do something, as an American, the more I want to do it. So that's what he doesn't understand is the American individualism that, like for instance, just in my state, we have double the CHLs in the past 5 years. Why did twice as many people in my state? That's a lot. I mean, think about anything else. What doubles in 4 or 5 years?
Unemployment numbers?
Well, yeah. Fair enough. But what type of group or what type of club doubles in 5 years?
Herpes.
It went. I think it's now up to almost 1 million people in Texas, and it used to be 400,000. I mean, that's a lot of people getting more CHLs. That's a lot of people reacting to the pressure being applied. But that's exactly what they're doing. They're applying pressure now. They're trying to find ways to poke and do stuff.
I think he's preaching to the choir for sure. The popular opinion, the popular media opinion is the guns are bad. And he's listening to them. He's always been trying to he's always been the popular president, and he's taking it to heart. I imagine he has some issue with it, but he's playing politics as usual. I mean, there's a lot of shit going on in general.
Well, again, Edge, let me point out the fact. Let me point out the fact that he has never, in the first 4 years of his first term, he never once said gun control. Even after a shooting, he never even said it. So
because I remember he got elected, everybody saying they're gonna. What?
Whenever a person doesn't say something, like I'm saying, when it comes to a politician, and everyone's like, well, let's reelect him. He's never said anything bad about guns. That's the biggest red flag to me because he talks about everything else, but he avoids that subject. The fact that he avoids a subject is
sure. I mean, I could see that, but Bush never talked about guns that much either.
Focus.
No, I mean it's obvious now. It's that he has made an aggressive standpoint that he believes that that guns and gun rights or freaking gun laws need to be strengthened and all that bullshit. And I agree with that completely. There's no denying that. But Bush never was a big gun. He never talked a lot about guns. He always talked kind of about being from the country and hooking a chainsaw and cutting down trees and shit. But he was never a big gun advocate that I ever saw come out and just, shoot the shit. As far as I understand, he's afraid of horses.
But his vice president shot a guy in the face.
Oh, God.
Is that the end of it?
Some guy there? Some guy hosting the chat?
It says we're live.
Strong guy fell asleep again. It's almost
I
midnight.
mean, realistically, I don't think you're ever going to see a president, anybody that's ever not going to be able to do anything that's not, the parties are ruined. I mean, everything's ruined.
I doubt we'll ever have I doubt anytime in the near future we're going to have any pro-gun president. We may have one that is tolerant of firearm ownership, but I don't think we're getting a pro-gun president anytime soon.
I don't think you're going to have a real hardcore, American hardcore values, president again, because everybody always has to play politics. I mean, I hate to say it, with YouTube playing back all the video all the time and constant playback, everybody's just trying to be popular because of what everybody, it's like on Facebook, you have to, you have to do what's rolling with the tide. If you're just the asshole who's always putting up the dumbass pictures of something silly, and then nobody watches your page and nobody gives a shit. So you have to do something you have to conform and all that bullshit.
Yeah, that assumes that there's some common level that everyone's going to aspire to. That's not just novelty that comes with kids being fascinated by a new toy. Dynamic changes when you give that to adults, and once they figure out how to use it and they start using it, there's an option out there besides the cheap thrill.
And yeah, I mean, I would say that one of the biggest problems we have right now that isn't going to change because, again, the Supreme Court has upheld it is the fact that we now have so much more corporate money influencing our politics. I mean, they basically fully legalized that with the super PACs and saying corporations are people and can give money and stuff like that. So now you just have more money flowing into the floodgates, and anyone who, how do I say this, wants to fix problems isn't going to be put into office. It's only the people who will go with the status quo and give out more.
Stone Guy left. We'll see if he comes back, but I doubt he will.
He just texted me that his internet broke, so I don't know if we're really still live or probably not even live anymore.
No, we're not live anymore.
Well, it's pretty long chat anyway.
Hour and a half or so? Damn it, Nathan, you and your yawning.
It's coming up on midnight his time.
We got Ted Cruz denouncing his Canuckness. Yeah, he wants to be the elite guy going into 2016.
Dude, Ted Cruz might make it as a vice presidential candidate, but he ain't going to make it as president.
Could he be better than Paul Ryan?
Well, a lot of Republicans understand this, so they're trying to reach out for the Latino vote, that they're really trying to go out. The Cubans are the minority in the Latin vote there, and they're mainly, they are mainly, a lot of Cubans are mainly conservatives. That's the history behind their voting. But
how many more elections do you think the baby boom has in them? That's going to change the dynamic 1,000%.
I think you got 2 more, maybe.
The baby boom? No, you've probably got another.
My dad's 68.
5?
My dad's 68.
Yeah,
well, the baby boom goes after
my dad just turned
70. So, well, you think about that. The baby boom's going to have about another 20 years.
I don't think so.
4 or 5, yeah. 4 or 5. You think about it, if they live to 72, that's another...
If they live to 72,
right,
they're way over 72 already, aren't they?
No, the baby boom started or actually technically ended in the 60s.
Yeah, I mean, my dad was born in 46. So, I mean,
yeah, baby boom went from the end of World War II
the end of Korea.
Yeah, it's about it's about a 15-year or so time frame. But still, my dad was on the earlier part of the baby boom. Yeah, so I'm thinking they'll affect 2, maybe 3 more elections heavily.
So if these corporations and everybody's so smart and powerful and rich and able to manipulate, they're not foreseeing massive trends that they use for their marketing and for their product selection and for their everything else that they do to be so big. I mean, they didn't accidentally grow to be massive, giant, smart, manipulative people. They did that by understanding what's coming, not what's being affected by what randomly happens, right?
Now, question: which is going to take over after the baby boom as being the force? Going to be the hippies or the yuppies?
None of that's
Yes.
going to take over.
But I mean, again, I hate to be Yankee here, but letting our giant corporations decide what's best for us is not always the best idea, because
Who
they
lets
will.
them? Come on, that's defeatist saying that they've already won.
No, but I'm just saying. You're saying that they got so big and so good, but because they're talented and stuff like that, because they made good decisions. No, it's unfortunately it's usually because they ran the little guy out of business, did every low down rotten trick that was legal, and the problem is the only thing they are in it for is to remove the rule sets hampering them from doing more. And the only reason
they can still watch us.
And the only reason the rules were put in place is because it hurts people. Like nobody put a rule in to limit a corporation because they didn't want them to become too successful. They put rules in place because there was something harmful happening. And all these corporations want to take those rules out.
All right, since Stone Guy's gone, start playing copyrighted music, get his channel in trouble.
I've been playing copyrighted music at Animal Frequencies.